Here I go. All right. So first we want to thank you for coming to our second session of the Outdoor Education Learning Series. I know that we had some technical difficulties. It was the worst technical day ever. So thank you for sticking with us and coming back. So we know that, pre-COVID-19 pandemic, generally we've seen this increase in interest around outdoor place-based education, which we're really happy about. But we definitely know that the interest has exploded kind of as we grapple with the fallout of the pandemic, because we want to know how to safely educate our students as they kind of come back to school and go into our classrooms, and really kind of tying that all together. I think that's really important because we really only have an hour. I just wanted to make sure that we're all aware of kind of how we're going to break the session down. So first, the first chunk, the first segment is kind of just this introduction piece. And then we're going to move into just a moderated panel discussion. So based on some of the questions that were submitted, we pulled the bigger pattern themes and put them into questions. And we're going to just go in a particular order, and our panelists are going to answer those. Then if a question that you have hasn't been answered, we're going to go into that Q&A form. And this is really like the audience participation section. So, when we're ready for that, I'll give a little bit of ground rules and get everyone on the same page, and we can start really having a nice dialogue. And then we're going to wrap up, and we're going to see about what our next steps are and kind of where to go from here. Any questions on just like the overall layout of this? Or are you guys excited? You guys are good? Thumbs up. Cool. Awesome. Okay, cool. So I'm going to just jump straight into like this moderator curated questions, because we have 5 panelists here today. But instead of me introducing them to you, what I was going to do is I was going to give each panelist a bit of time to kind of introduce themselves, including their role and where they work, and then give each of them an opportunity to describe their experience with outdoor learning. So if that's okay, we're going to start with Scott, and we'll go from there. So take it away, Scott.
Great. Hi, everybody. My name is Scott Ellis. I am the Thetford Academy Outdoor Program Coordinator. Thetford Academy is an independent school in Thetford, Vermont, with 7th through 12th graders. I run all of the outdoor education programs at the school, as well as teach a class called Environmental Studies and Outdoor Education, which is an interdisciplinary outdoor education class. I also wear another hat. I'm also a camp director at Ohana Family Camp. I believe in the power of healing of nature, and I believe all of the lessons that we're looking at to teach the youth can be taught outdoors. And I use that as my core piece of educational curriculum, is the outdoor environment.
Okay, Kat. Thank you, Scott.
Hi, I'm Kat Robbins, and I work in partnership with Woodstock Union High School and Marsh Billings Rockefeller National Historical Park. So I'm in a joint position. I'm officially an employee of the school district, and I get to work with teachers and students in 7th through 12th grade to connect them with resources in the community to help make what they're learning really grounded in place. I really never want a student to say, why are we learning this? I really believe that students should know why they're learning something, and to be able to have an experiential way of interacting with the material and the learning objectives. And I get to also coordinate the interns and youth programs at the national park in the summertime, and during the school year, students are increasingly able to get school credit for doing internship type work at the national park and other locations as well.
Thank you. Tim?
I am Tim Sanborn. I teach 6th grade science at Berrytown Middle and Elementary School. I have a lot of experience, a lot of background in environmental ed. I'm an Eagle Scout, but then also I am a 21-year camp counselor at Lotus Lake Day Camp in Williamstown. So I've been doing their sort of outdoor education program for a while. I worked briefly in Orange County, California at their outdoor science school. And it wasn't until just the last couple of years that we've really been allowed at the middle school level to pursue outdoor education. COVID has really provided a lot of flexible thinking, a lot of opportunities for people to really give permission to try new and exciting things. And so I this year was teaching entirely outside through January, and then now I'm still 2 days a week outside with my students, really focusing on the geology and the hydrology, because those are both part of my science curriculum anyway, but really based thinking about what's out there and helping kids to identify the surroundings that they have at their fingertips that they don't necessarily always interact with.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. Amy?
Hi, I'm Amy Clapp, and I'm a 3rd and 4th grade teacher at Salisbury Community School. And I'm happy to be here, and it gave me a time to reflect to how I got here. So when I started teaching about 23 years ago, I had the opportunity to go to Teton Science School for part of my summer. And they had a program called Journeys, and it was about being outside, and that was a very place-based educational place. And so I brought that back to my school, but that really meant just going on nature walks. We did a lot of nature walks at the beginning of my career, and would visit the pond once a year, that kind of thing. I then luckily connected with Otter Creek Audubon Society here in Middlebury, and really got the kids interested in birding. And that's when I realized that spending decent amounts of time outside, this was probably about 7 years ago, really shaped the classroom in amazing ways. And so it really started with those 2 experiences for me. And then I went on to educating children outdoors at the North Branch Nature Center. That must have been like 5 years ago now, and developed an outdoor classroom. So it's kind of been an evolution for me over time. We've been using the outdoor classroom for probably 5 years now, ever since I went to that class. And this year, we spend all of Wednesday in our forest classroom, and we haven't missed a day all year, which is great. And I think that my guiding philosophy is just the idea of really believing that if I can help kids connect to nature in some way, shape, or form, meet them where they are, that connection sticks. And so that's kind of what really keeps me motivated, along with the fact that it's hands down every student's favorite day of the week is the day we spend out in forest classrooms. So those are 2 really easy ways to motivate us to keep going out, is the strong sense of passion and then how much the kids glob onto it.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. And last but finally not least, we have Susan. Susan.
Hi, I'm Susan Koch, and I have been teaching for more than 25 years. That's the way I like to put it. I teach 1st grade this year, but my whole career has pretty much been in the primary grades, pre-KK, 1st and 2nd. And I'm based right in downtown Montpelier, and we've been doing an outdoor program for the last 12 years. And as Amy said, we have a partnership with the North Branch Nature Center, and our program is called ECO, which is Educating Children Outdoors. And we go outside once a week, similar to what how Amy mentioned. But the real reason I started thinking about that is because I was finding probably about 15 years ago that like kids were not, the little kids I work with did not really have a sense of wonder. Things were being handed to them and they weren't really curious or adventurous, even some of them. And so I sort of was noticing that when we were outdoors, that totally changed. And sort of the outdoors and the environment became a co-teacher. And I was really interested in exploring that more. So we started the ECO program, and it's been going really well ever since. And we've had a chance to spend time aligning the standards to our work. And I really like to think about my motivating thing is that Socrates quote which says, wisdom begins with wonder. And I just remember that all the time, because I think that if we want kids and adults to become earth stewards, we're going to have to help them care. And so thinking about the spectrum of all the ages, we all have the same goal, and it needs to start somewhere. So that's where we're starting, in the primary grades.
Awesome, thank you. So a lot of the questions that we were getting on our forums kind of was about how do we like start with our outdoor ed program? So people want to know, like, what was the end goal for your students when you began to think about that outdoor science ed piece, and like, how did that influence the aspects of your planning? And we can start with Scott.
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, where does it all begin and what's your end goal? I would say my end goal is environmental stewardship. We believe we have one planet, and if we do not take care of it, it will not be here. But you can't force that on kids. And as Susan was saying, it begins with that sense of wonder. And for a first grader or kindergartner up to a senior in high school, they both need that sense of wonder. So we actually open up with reading Rachel Carson's Sense of Wonder, and then tie that into asking questions. And I think a thing that as an outdoor educator, you don't need to know the answer to everything, that the question is far more valuable than the answer. And so the end goal is environmental stewardship, but first you gotta like notice it, and then you got to wonder about it. And then you may want to protect it when you get down that line. And I think you can also tie in your proficiency-based, science-based models within all of those steps that go in between those places. But how an outdoor program starts, it tends to start with passionate people who love to go to the outdoors themselves. And then if you have that passion, it becomes contagious to the kids. And that can be one of the most important pieces is, as that educator, are you the one who loves to be out there? The kids are going to pick up off of that. So a lot of different ways you go with that, but I think, environmental stewardship is where it ends and wonder is where it begins.
Awesome, thank you. Tim, we're just going to use the same question. We're just going to go through the panel again. Tim, can you answer that, please?
Yeah, my end goal for my students is to have them feel safe, confident, and comfortable in the outdoors. I've noticed with my students, specifically at this age group, there's so much attachment to the screen and the video game and the apps. And so they're not spending that time outside. They're certainly not spending that time alone outside in the woods. And so to provide opportunities for students to really notice what's going on, to ask those questions about what's out there, and to observe things that are under their feet. We will go through and find things like the red-backed salamanders that they're everywhere. They're so abundant, and sometimes they've just never seen them. They've never noticed them. And so for me, it was really all about getting students outside, getting them comfortable in that environment, knowing that they can be out there pretty much at any temperature, in any weather, and be comfortable and be safe and find their own confidence, and giving them permission to take safe risks while they're out there, to take risks that push them to explore. Sure, go into that mud and see what's in there. Go and explore into these areas that maybe other people haven't given them permission to do, or they haven't had opportunity to see. And so we have, where I work, this great access to the berry forest there. And so to not utilize that, to not give those kids that opportunity seemed like such a waste. And then it really was very simple to look at the science, the NGSS practices, and say, can we make students make logical claims and back it with evidence that they see? I think that's, at the heart of NGSS is that inquiry-based learning, and that's really what the program is all about.
Thank you. Kat, the same question when you're thinking about like, where do you start? What were your goals for your students?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to have a really transformative experience when I was in high school with some teachers who were actually like taxidermists, and they would pick up roadkill and bring it into the classroom. And there was a taxidermy class, and I didn't actually dive into that, but then I took some of those specimens and used them to do environmental education with younger students while I was in high school. And it sort of blew my mind when I found out that not everyone in high school was using dead animals to learn. And so that's sort of where it started for me. But now working at the high school level, students are, and at every level, students are grappling with some really complex issues and global issues. And they're learning about like burning the rainforest in the Amazon, and they're learning about globalism, right? And so sometimes that starts to feel a little disconnected for them, and they still have a really hard time feeling like that's part of their lives. And so taking these really big concepts and grounding them and rooting them in the place where they're actually at, and still asking those really complicated questions, but grounding it in a local context, really helps students connect and start to care, which will lead to what Scott was saying, that idea of stewardship. Our school district has adopted stewardship as a component of our portrait of a graduate, which is really amazing. And so how can we facilitate that sense of efficacy within our students and desire to be environmental stewards? Well, they have to have fun outside. They have to care about it. They have to know about it and feel connected to the environment, but they also need to be connected to each other. And I think when you're outside, social dynamics can play out in a much different way than they can in a classroom. It's sort of like when I go to a lacrosse game and I see students like putting it all out there on the field, and then I see them in the classroom like putting none of it out there, right? So you can reach sort of a happy medium with that sometimes when you take those same groups of students outdoors and you let them interact with each other and interact with the content in a much different way than they can when they're in the classroom. And I'm lucky enough that I get to work cross-disciplinary. So I get to work with art teachers and English teachers and math teachers and wellness teachers, and it's not siloed as like a science or just one particular aspect of the curriculum. So students are going outside for all of these different classes and seeing how the skills that they're learning in these different disciplines can be learned through the outdoors, whether it's art or whether it's science or whether it's English. And I feel like the more experiences they have in different classes, the more universal and impactful it becomes, because they start to see how things are interconnected in different ways too.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Amy?
So I feel like I'm going to echo a little bit of what I've heard, because I've heard so many ideas that resonate with me. But when I first started teaching, it was the Save the Rainforest was kind of the environmental thing, save the rainforest. And when I first started teaching, the kids coming into my classroom knew much more about the rainforest than they knew about anything outside their door. And so that was a huge eye-opener for me as a new teacher. And in addition to that, there was this sort of underlying philosophy that because we live in Vermont and we have great outdoor spaces, that kids were just like somehow absorbing that and knowing how to be outside. And so when I first started going outside with my students, I realized two things. A, they didn't know hardly anything about the plants and animals around them. And they were pretty uncomfortable out there. When you got off the lawns, it was a completely kind of foreign experience for them. So that, part of my philosophy when I started out was just getting kids to spend time outside, off lawns, off of the schoolyard, away from the playground equipment. And then through that, it's grown. And this is where I think some of the connections are, is that this idea of stewardship and building that continuously through their educational experience. I can't be responsible for all of it, but I can be responsible for my little part of it. And to me, what I've seen with the age group that I teach is the idea of really connecting. So being able to identify, maybe not even by name, but knowing different plants and animals that are around them if you know them, you're more likely to take care of them. You know, that's kind of just inherent. And I always make the analogy to walking down the street. When you walk down the street, if you don't know the person coming the other direction, you might even avert your eyes. You might say hi, as opposed to if you know the person, you're going to say something like, "Hi, Margaret," you know, "Hi, Charlie." You've got this immediate connection because you know them. And so I've come to grow the idea that I don't want my students to just be comfortable out there. I want them to be really connected out there and to know what's around them. And I feel that if that happens, if they really know what's around them, that stewardship sort of inherently, you care more. And so that's, I feel like, where I've gotten to today with my philosophy and my end goal for planning our time outside is really that connecting and really feeling a part of it and knowing what's around them.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. And Susan, round us out.
Yeah, so I'm going to tell a story about when I first started, when the ECO program first started in Montpelier. My class was called an ELL hub classroom, I think is what it was called. And I had 8 learners in my classroom of 16. So half of the class that were had come from outside of Vermont. And so that year I was doing some action research for my master's program. And I was like, how can I make sure that all the learners are having the same kinds of opportunities? And Learning Outdoors offered that, right? It sort of offered to level the playing field. So I thought I'm going to take some notes. I'm going to keep track of how many questions kids are asking. I'm going to notice their inquiry approach. I'm really going to take data for my action research. So I started that process. And what I found was that nature became leveled the playing field for everyone, not just the kids who were learning English or maybe had a language disability or a learning disability. It kind of put everyone in a different place. And like you've all said, it was really about learning how to slow down, how to wonder, how to notice. One of the things that came up is that several of my students were from Rwanda and they never, ever asked questions, ever. They never asked. They would say things like, "This is a long stick," or something like that. And so finally I asked one of the dads and I was like, "Hey, your kids, like, they never ask questions. They never use the question words, who, what, where, when, why, how." And the dad said, "No, we don't do that." And I was like, "Oh, okay. I'm never going to get that kind of data." He said, "It's all about the intonation." And so I learned, that was something interesting I learned. And it was an assumption I had, is sort of like that language structures were the same, and they definitely aren't. And like Amy was saying, what I learned the most is that everyone needed to connect. We have nature names. So the kids pick a nature name for the year. And so my red fox was a student from Rwanda, and she was freezing. She was always freezing, no matter what the weather, she was freezing. And so she became really adept at making fire. And I know you're like, "What? You let a 6-year-old make fire?" Yes, I did. We learned a lot about fire safety. There were adults monitoring, and she really became the expert on fire. And so the opportunities outside allowed each person to connect in the way that is most needed for them. But the really cool thing is that everyone else is learning along the way. So all the other kids were learning about the habits of a red fox or a black-capped chickadee, because each student has a nature name. And so my goal, again, is, like has been said by everyone else, is to really create people who care about our environment and taking care of our planet. And so starting in those little ways about letting people have opportunities outside to discover what nature can give them and what they can bring to nature are really, really important. And that's sort of the crux of my philosophy about outdoor ed. In all honesty, I wish we could be outdoors every day, all the time. But I do teach in the smallest city, the smallest state capital, and we have a piece of land that we go to, and we have set up some camps there, and it works okay, but there's spaces that we share with the community, so we don't leave anything there. We can talk more about logistics later because I imagine there might be questions about
Oh,
that too.
Absolutely. And I was gonna say, littlest city. I think Virgins has that. Like that's on our like little motto that we're the
Oh.
littlest city.
Okay, so we're the littlest capital, I think.
Yeah.
is what it is.
Well, we can share. We can share that title for real. So there are a lot of questions regarding maybe I don't want to say like common pitfalls, but like if you were to go back to like when you started this, what is something that you either wished you knew or wish you had access to, either resources and materials and things like that? Because that also is like a challenge that we might have to like overcome. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts were, Scott.
Yeah, maybe I'll twist the direction of that, but I've been very, very fortunate with grantors. And so as far as money goes, there are people in our community that totally support outdoor education. You just got to know who to ask. And that can make the world of difference if you do have those financial resources to do things. So I encourage you, if you're struggling, to ask and find out who those people are, because that can, for us, it's really, we're able to do whatever we want and people are happy to give us a lot more. And as far as like what I wish I knew, I was tasked early on to inspire other teachers to do outdoor education. And that's a challenge. I'll throw that out there. If a teacher wants to teach Catcher in the Rye and they've been doing it for 20 years, they're not going to change. Doesn't matter how excited I am about outdoor education. You can only open doors. You can't force people through it. And you have to create relationships with people before you can inspire them to go in a new direction. So the pandemic actually opened a lot of doors in a positive way. So teachers that had been teaching Catcher in the Rye the same way for a million years said, well, why don't we make it into a story trail and you could have parts along the way? And they were actually willing to try it this year. And I'm hopeful that some of the silver linings of this difficult year can carry into a greater outdoor education experience. But you can't change other people unless they really want to change as well. So that's my hard part that I learned along the way.
Thank you. Kat, you want to jump on that?
I think one thing that I wish that I knew was that blank faces don't always mean disengaged. And that students are bringing a whole lot of stuff every time they show up, outdoors or indoors. And even if we don't have like the most brilliant conversation about the topic that we're talking about that day, that we're planting seeds that will come back to students time and time again. I remember when I was doing environmental education at a YMCA camp, and it was the beginning of the school year, and we did all of the environmental education stuff. And at the end of the week, a student threw away a brand new pair of sneakers because they had gotten a little dirty because they were like her new school sneakers. And I just started crying. I was like, what am I doing here? Why are we doing this? What sort of impact are we possibly having? And have come to accept that, like, again, I can't make people change, but I can like hopefully create some more fertile ground to be more open to wondering or questioning or wanting to be a steward, whether it's a teacher or a student. And that the more we can create these experiences for students, the easier it will get, the more meaning it will create in their lives. And I've learned to sort of not take it as personally, even when I'm still sort of bringing my whole self to that experience.
Yeah, I remember, it's just an anecdotal. So I remember being in a position where you care so much and then to have it turn around and you're like, what on earth am I doing? But what was told to me was, remember, you're planting the seed.
Yeah.
You're planting the seed, you're cultivating the earth, and you're planting the seed and taking care of things. And when it blossoms, you don't know. You don't know if it will ever blossom, but maybe, 15 years down the road, all of a sudden a little green shoot will come out, and you have done that. So I totally get where you're coming from. Tim, can you talk a little bit about that?
For me, something that I wish that I had sort of been more prepared for or been more aware of is learning to be prepared for others. I know what I need when I go outside. That's really intuitive to me, and I know to bring it to school and have it, and I have access to that. And so when we first started this program, I was co-teaching with Stephanie Kingzett, who teaches social studies. So we were out there with 2 groups of kids at a time. So we had 40 students out in the woods with us at one time. And that's a lot of, I forgot my snow pants. I don't have the right socks on. I don't have the boots that I need. There's a lot of that it does not come. Certainly there are things that I'm like, oh, we should have some extras of this, this, and this. But I wouldn't think about, oh, when we come back inside, we should have extra socks for them for that. I recently invested in really tall socks for my students because it's tick season. Because I talk to them about being covered, and they'll show up in these little sneakers with their jeans on. Well, there's a gap there. That's prime tick real estate. And so really for me, it was a lot of thinking about what are those items that students will need to be prepared for, and then how do you acquire those items? And I've been really fortunate in that I've had families who at the end of the snow season are, my child is never going to use these snow pants again. Why don't you keep them for your program? I have coworkers who bring in bags of stuff as they clean up after their children or after their own gear, and they just leave it. And so we've been really fortunate in that regard to have all of those layers and boots in many sizes. But you'll never have everything. It won't ever be a perfect fit because you can't plan for every student. In the 6th grade, I have folks who still look like they're in 3rd grade and people who are my size. So to stock clothing for all of those is really hard. But it is something that I personally have been working on, is what are those needs and how do we meet those needs and how do you do it really cost effectively? And we've built a culture in our school. It's not a big deal to borrow anything, and I have had in past experiences with people who are like, I'm not going to wear a pair of socks someone else has ever worn. But, when it comes to, okay, I've come out of the woods and I'm muddy to the waist, I don't care who wore those pants. I need something to wear to get through the rest of the day. And so that's something that I certainly, I've heard it said to me, and I had this list of all these items that I was sure I had and was ready to go. And then it was, here are the 20 other things that I wish that I had had. And so for me, that was really something that I wish I had known a little bit more about, but also was really a solvable problem because we do have community buy-in, we do have administrative buy-in, and folks want to help and they want to make sure our kids are safe and comfortable.
Yeah, I know that actually came up at the Cheryl Charles Q&A. So I'm glad that you were able to speak to that about how do we build equity for students that might not have access to that or forget. We've all forgotten, Amy, would you like to
Sure. So thinking about that question, I think that probably my biggest challenge to implementation was me. Really, I do think it's a little bit of a leap of faith to go out and do this the first time. And I can remember, like I said, we did lots of nature walks and go visit the pond or go visit a field or visit a wetland because we have all those things on our property. But to go and spend the whole morning outside in the forest, oh my gosh, the planning I did before the first session was weeks long, and with another teacher. Should we do it here? Should we do it there? Should we have this set up? We killed the planning process, but all we really needed to do is go. Finally, we were just like, we need to just go. And so that I was pairing up with the kindergarten teacher at the time. So it was kindergarten and 4th grade. And we just did it. So I just feel like that's part of is just trusting yourself. And then continuing on, and I think I grow every year with this, is learning to let go of more. You may have a certain, as you spoke to, Kat, you may have a certain guiding principle that you're really hoping to instill over one lesson or a period of lessons. but that might not be where the students are going, and letting that sort of being a teacher or guider, but not driving it, not driving the bus, making sure the bus doesn't careen off the road, but not having to drive it all the time, I think was another way that my biggest obstacle for implementation. And I think the other part of that, people spoke to community buy-in, is that making it so this wasn't like this extra thing we're doing. Like we do school and then we do forest classroom, that they're two different things, but that the learning that is going on in forest classroom is just as rich, that parents didn't think, oh, I can pull my kid that day and go skiing. Those were things that were obstacles pretty minorly, but that idea that this was something in addition to school, it wasn't school of and to itself. So I think the idea that there's as much education going on in the forest as there is in the classroom.
Thank you. And Susan?
Yeah, one of the things I think that I wished I thought about more early on was enlisting community partners. Now, I know this year has been different with COVID, but there are so many parents and people in the community that can ride this train with you and can meet you in the forest and share a story or share expertise. And early on, I was sort of a bit like Amy. I was like really just happy to get out there with the kids and have everybody all geared up. That was like, I felt like an accomplishment. But as we moved along further, we could have a bee expert come out and talk about bees, or there are a lot of ways to weave in the curriculum and use community partners for that. And so I feel like we're doing that much better these days, but early on I was hesitant to do that. And I'm just going to echo the statement about gear a little bit. I feel like wool socks are sort of the magic of eco for most of our season. Wool socks on little feet makes such a huge difference. You can have the cruddiest boots, but the wool socks help. And the Darn Tough Socks Company, we all ask them for donations and they give them to us. So just go ahead and ask if you're looking for wool socks. They're really nice at the factory. They don't give us like the brand new ones, they give us the seconds, but they're really nice. But I do think that just looking for ways to communicate well with parents, with administration, to reinforce what Amy was saying, that like, this is the learning. This is not an extra thing. This is how we're learning on this particular day. And if you can get your administration to come out, it sounds like a little thing, right? Invite them to join you for a day. Well, they seem to like not have much time on their hands, but to have them come join you for even if it's a little bit, and have parents come join in, I think it really, I have to be honest, I have tons of parent volunteers on Eco Day because I think people love leaving work for a couple hours and being outside. I think it's beneficial to parents, grandparents, caregivers, and everyone is looking for that connection. So if you're starting up a program or new, don't forget to reach out to those folks, because the community partnerships are amazing and only enhance the learning.
Thank you. And so this is our final question for the panel, and then we're going to go into our Q&A. So I was just hoping that each one of you would be able to provide a piece of practical advice and we've already heard a lot, but like pick one, one piece of practical advice that you can give to someone today who wants to start incorporating outdoor ed into their practice tomorrow. And Scott, we'll start with you again.
Yeah, practical advice is, I think many people have fear of the outdoors, and that it's hard for me to understand because I don't, so I have to remind myself that other people do fear the outdoors, and they could fear it in a lot of different ways. But once they go there, they will lose the fear. It's kind of like that fear of the unknown. And I've seen that time and time again, that that once people go out and learn outdoors, it's like kids, they don't want to put their phone down, but they know it's good for them to put the phone down, right? Like they know it's good to go outside. They just don't want to. They're going to complain about it. But if you can be that driving force that gets them outside, they will love it and they will want to keep going back. And don't be afraid to be bold. Like I come up with crazy ideas and I'm like, oh my God, they're never going to let me do this. And then they let me do it and the kids love it. Like I'm going to have my kids spend 24 hours in the woods by themselves next week. Like nothing. They don't get to bring anything, nothing with them for 24 hours. We've been building towards it. And when I first came up with this idea, I was like, parents would never let me do this. They let me do it. And everybody loves it. And it's this, the reflections afterwards are life-changing. And the whole experience for the kids is amazing. So be bold, get outside. And once you get over that fear factor, you're going to be okay.
Thank you. Kat.
Yeah, and before you're bold, if you're not quite so bold yet, just start small. Like you don't necessarily have to do that like Dragonfly Mercury project with big posters at Dartmouth, like our ninth, like that's amazing. I'm so glad our students do that, but you don't have to do that. Like you can just go outside or have one guest speaker come and work with your students in the forest. You can start really small without it needing to be the like ultimate pinnacle experience at first. And then kids will get bored of that. And so move towards that 24-hour solo maybe. But I would say just start. That's always the hardest thing. And I have a supervisor once who told me to, I don't even know where this phrase came from, but she said, eat the frog first, like do that thing that you don't want to do first to get it sort of out of the way. And so like, what's the thing that you're most nervous about doing, like to take your students outside? Like maybe do that first, like go to the river first or whatever it is. Just start.
Awesome. Thank you. I was thinking about the frog I had something else to say, but I was just like the frog. I don't want to eat a frog. Please. Tim, why don't you jump in?
My advice for first going outside would be to be overly planned to start out. Have a rain day plan and a sunny day plan just in case, and have a snowball snow plan and a crusty ice day plan. But then also to just be completely, utterly prepared to throw it out the window when you get derailed because you found tracks from a snowshoe hare, or you found that all of the wood frogs are out that day. You have to be completely flexible in your thinking and really go with what you're experiencing when you're there. And you know what? You can save those plans for another day or another year. The planning never is a waste of time. And it's always good to have that backup. But a lot of times, once you get there, the forest will drive your experience anyway, and it'll change what you're doing with your time anyway. And so I would just suggest that you've got to be really flexible and willing to roll with it once you get out there. And it's a very teachery instinct to be like, no, we're not doing that today. We're doing this. And you need to just let it go. And follow the kids' interest and follow, what you find.
Wonderful. Thank you. Amy?
So I'm going to echo what Kat said. And I think that the biggest piece of advice is just do it. And then my second piece, which is much more practical and boring, I think. But one thing I remember hearing at this Cheryl Charles is this idea of, I heard a lot of people say, felt like it was recess. I felt like they didn't, this idea that it was out of control. And I heard someone say Lord of the Flies and all this stuff. And so one thing, which I actually brought home, but one thing that really helped me feel better going out and has stuck, it's been added to, is just having routines. I think that helps kids feel safer who might feel fearful about going out, and it provides a little bit of structure in a place that can sometimes feel unstructured. So, and add to those routines, like maybe it's a stretch for you to just go outside in the forest and read a book. So start with that. And then next time go out in the forest and read a book and have 10 minutes of sit spot time. And then once you've got that under feeling good, add to the routine, and so it seems very practical for a place that's really magical. But I do feel like that has helped create a really good culture for my classes in the forest.
Wonderful. Those are just wonderful suggestion, Amy. Just like the building. I think that's fantastic. Susan.
So I can't believe none of you guys said this, but make sure to have fun, right? Make it fun. And I am not like, I'm really like, I don't run. I don't really like running that much. It's not my thing. But when we have an outdoor day, I'm totally into playing like the games where I'm like a bird chasing kids, or I'm a predator playing. So play games, have fun. And like Amy said, I was going to talk also about the routine. We really have a really well-established routine. And this year, for the very first time, I have used the Kelly kettle and made tea with the kids every single week, all year long. We have made tea. And so my class knows that when we have tea time, it's sort of the end of our time outdoors together. And after tea time comes sit spots and our gratitude time. And recently we just planted some mint so that we can harvest it and dry it and make our own mint tea with mint from the garden. So it's kind of come full circle, but definitely the routines and fun are really, I think, what keeps us going and enjoying those days. And like Amy said, they're my favorite day too. Like you said, all of your kids love the outdoor day. It's my favorite day too.
I have to jump in too, because you just said something, Susan, that is absolutely like something I would suggest, and that's the gratitudes at the end. And I think it speaks a little bit to what you said, Kat, too, where you never know what you planted. And sometimes you're thinking, what did I just do? And having those gratitudes at the end of Forest Classroom just is a heart warmer for everyone. You just, if you questioned yourself, then when you hear what the kids say they're grateful for that the forest provided for them that day, I always leave feeling like, okay, I did something right.
Well, thank you so much to our panelists. You took your time, you prepared great answers. I hope that the audience has been soaking all of this in, taking notes. I'm kind of watching everyone. I see them scribbling. So what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to unpin the panelists, and hopefully up in the right-hand corner, you can change your view so that we can kind of all see each other for the Q&A, because I think because we're a smaller group, I just kind of wanted to like open it up a little bit. So now we come to our audience participation segment. And this is where we can address questions that you have. We do want to be able to address as many questions as you have. So there are some ground rules, very briefly. So we're going to first ask that when you ask your question, you do that first. So I know that we love to tell stories and we want context and stuff. Ask your question first, and then give like 1 or 2 sentences afterwards for context if you think that's going to help. If you want to ask a particular panelist a question, like if I wanted to ask Tim to kind of tell me more about long socks that can help me protect from ticks, I would actually say his name. I would say, this question is for Tim. I would ask my question, and then I would have that context. And then I also am inviting the panelists that, please engage the audience. If you yourself want to hear something more about what someone might have said or wanted, a little bit more context, feel free. I mean, it's a small group. I think this is going to be a great conversation. And if you're shy or your mic doesn't work, or you just don't want to speak because you've been in front of kids all day, or you've been yelling at your administration, I'm not going to judge. You can drop a question in the chat. We do have some VSTA folks here that I've kind of asked to pull questions to ask if you're just not comfortable or you're afraid that you're not going to remember something. So they're going to be on top of that. I do ask that one person try to talk at a time, that we monitor our airtime, because I know that technically we are here till 5, but I'm hoping that maybe you guys have some wiggle room if you want to stay. I do have the Zoom open until 5:30. So yeah. So I'm going to let you guys go for it. So I don't know who wants to go first.
I'll go first. I'll jump in. You all have spoken about forest, going into the forest school, et cetera. And I'm picturing, forest primeval in habitats. And I wonder if any of you have any advice for school grounds that are very much modified. I teach in Randolph, and I find like there are a lot of invasive honeysuckle and other things, and it's not really a beautiful place in a lot of ways without some manicuring. And so I wonder if anybody has any advice for that kind of a situation. No.
Jump in, Susan.
Well, I can talk a little bit because we don't even have a place on our school grounds. So we travel within the city of Montpelier to sort of this, it's called a preserve, but it's basically, a little bit of woods in a field. But we've sort of done some work. Like in the beginning, part of the job is to kind of build camp with the kids. And so we got some parents to donate some stumps, and the kids have done some raking and some investigating, like there's a sort of a watershed. So we don't, mess with that water. But I do think, it's not ideal. It was not my dream. It's not sort of the forest that you think of for forest school, but it's an outdoor space, and it's amazing what's living there and learning about what's there. And it works. So even though it's not perfect, it works. And a lot of the kids right here in our town do not play outside. So just being outside is an accomplishment for some of these kids. And it's kind of surprising, but true.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that question too. I think developing your spaces, there's so much learning there. Like you don't need a giant forest. Like a small little piece in a city still has infinite amounts of lessons. And you brought up invasives, like make that the lesson and learn and tie that to the larger picture. And we like to bring in, both sides of the perspective. You look at bittersweets, bad invasive, but it's also great cordage making material. So teach the kids how to make rope and how to cut back that, and then move that into a space that makes a new little trail that leads to a place. And the ownership they feel if they made something and they come back and see something they made later, it's pretty special to them. And you can put them to work and make that part of the learning as well. Yeah.
Scott, that made me think about, we've been working for a couple of years now collecting knotweed, and we make knotweed flutes just because it's a really good way to try to do something with the Japanese knotweed. But Linda, there's a lot of chances to just kind of be goofy, but they can learn so much when you kind of are learning about something like that. And I am going to give a shout out to Amy, your naturally literate books. Amy's created something. Maybe you should talk about it more. I don't want to get it wrong, but those have been really helpful for kids to sort of see what belongs and what doesn't belong.
Sure. I was actually gonna, I'll address that, but I also wanted to say that I think that I happen to be in a place that has probably the vision of what you're thinking of, Linda. But I do believe that even if we didn't have that, when you take your class to a place, even if it isn't beautiful in your eyes, it becomes theirs, and therefore it becomes beautiful to them and you too. But so I think I'll say that, and then I'll drop in the chat the link about naturally literate, but it's a little booklet that helps kids connect to nature. So I'll drop information for that in the chat if people are interested. And I'll speak to it more, but I don't want to, I'm not trying to selfishly promote anything.
Sorry, that was one of our ground rules.
It was, and I
It's
sort
not
of
like I didn't think it was you. I just was like, oh, this looks like a good ground rule. I'll just take it from Google.
I'm just going to mention though, because it's a tool that we discovered, I don't know, like maybe 5 years ago, we discovered that AV published this, or 4 years ago or something. But it is a really useful tool for young kids learning outside, and it has sort of a checklist format. so they can keep track of what they're noticing, and they can keep it over the years. So it's a helpful tool. And again, I know we weren't supposed to promote things, but it's really, I really enjoy it very.
It seems like I was unfairly targeting you. That was.
I didn't. But I put it in there. I put the site for more information in there, and I will explain that the idea is that if kids can connect, it's kind of what I started with, which was my guiding philosophy, that if kids can connect and know what's around them, and even go so far as to name some of those things, they're more connected to it. And that was really my guiding philosophy. And that's why I created that checklist, that booklet too. So.
So we have a question in the chat. So it's for Susan or Amy, who work with the younger kids like I do. Well, I mean, I don't, but do you have any resources you can share digitally, other ideas or suggestions for routines and what you actually do outside? Do you come up with your own activities or use certain resources? And before you guys answer, I also think that we can expand that to the secondary level, because I know that I have received emails like, do you have any resources on forestry? And I'm like, I don't know, probably not. So I think that it can be answered K-12. But first, Amy and Susan, if either of you want to jump in.
I can go ahead, and I'm sure you have some too, Susan. So a couple of the resources that I use religiously, and I can put the titles in, but Mary Holland has books that are absolutely phenomenal that take you day by day, what's happening in nature. And so she has this one, which is Naturally Curious Day by Day. There's another one called Naturally Curious, and that's a month-by-month field guide to what's going on in Vermont. They're like my go-to all the time. And again, I'll put these all in the chat. Another one of mine is called The Outside Story. This was published a while ago, but it is also a month-by-month, and it just helps you. If you feel like you need to know more about what's going on at any certain time, all three of those books help. The routines I use the same routines all the time, and I brought my little board. So this board goes down with me every week down to Forest Classroom. It's laminated, and depending on how behaviors have been, we either review it at the beginning of Forest Classroom, but not always. And we always do these things. So we walk together to and from the Forest Classroom, and then we do a notice and wondering. We have a story, and we usually do snack and a story, but this year we're not allowed to do snacks, so it's just been story. And then there's a lesson, so we tie something in. And the book that I use a ton that I didn't bring is a book published by Vins, and help me out, Susan, or anyone else if you know it, but I think it's, let me think and it'll come, or let me look for a minute online and see if I can find the name of it. But it has activities for hands-on nature. Thank you, Linda. That's it. Hands-on nature. And a lot of times, if there isn't something that I've come up with on my own, that's my go-to, to be like, what should we do this week? And that has lots of great stuff. And then they have choice. And one thing that happened early on that I had to tackle is choice time started to really look like one of two things: crazy recess time, or, and this is when I was taking 5th and 6th graders out, and with the 6th graders, it turned into clumps of kids socializing and talking about the other clumps of kids. And so I actually called Amy Butler from North Branch Nature Center and said, here's my problem. What can you do to help? And she said, brainstorm ideas of things they can do during choice time. So we brainstormed, you can build forts, make fairy houses, gather firewood, log roll, look for nesting birds, investigate. They're pretty broad. And that way, if kids aren't doing anything, that was my biggest, I was like, they aren't doing anything during choice time. it gave them ideas, and now that problem's disappeared. And then we have our sit spots, and then we share our gratitudes. So that's kind of what we do, and it frames out our days in the forest classroom.
Yeah, we have a really similar routine, and I've been using the words forest workshop because in our classrooms we have reading workshop and math workshop and writing workshops. We had forest workshop, which is sort of the lesson time, and then we have forest choice time, which is just sort of like Amy was saying with choices that are offered, but it's kind of like the old center time that some of the primary teachers are familiar with. But in terms of digital information, we at my school, my team has an entire year of lessons sort of that go sort of with our themes and with our science units, and we don't do them the same year to year, but we plug in, like right now we're in the middle of a bird unit, and we're also doing bird's eye view and mapping. So those are the big ideas for the month of May. And then we have written lessons together. And if I'm not sure who wrote the question, but if you want to email me, I can share some of that information with you. But I recommend, if you have a team or if you're able to take the summer course that the North Branch Nature Center offers, because it really, you sort of participate in eco. You really are immersed in it for a week, and you get a feel of the flow, and you get a feel of the way you can incorporate the lessons into your overall curriculum. But if that person wants to reach out, I'm happy to share some materials.
Go ahead. Yes. I butcher your name every single time, and I was like, I'm not gonna do it, so I'm just gonna say
all those consonants in the
yes.
middle. My name's Marika, and I am a science teacher at Colchester High School, and I'm looking to next year to really sort of take our biology curriculum and really sort of revamp it to take advantage of the woods, and there's a beaver pond, and there's some vernal pools, and we're right by the lake, and trying to sort of revamp our curriculum, which is sort of, very classroom oriented and sort of more, sort of more traditional, and trying to incorporate as many opportunities to rethink how students learn things, and doing a lot more place-based learning. Clearly, I'm not ready to sort of jump into where some of you are going every single week throughout the year doing that. But so I guess I'm just sort of, for those of you that have taught high school, and knowing that we're sort of needing to meet the NGSS standards within life science as well. Sort of what advice or sort of what approach would you take to sort of trying to think about, would you sort of think of a unit first and then sort of see how you could sort of move things in, or sort of what approach would you take to just sort of getting getting kids outside and sort of rethinking curriculum in that way?
So before I taught middle school, I actually taught high school at Linden Institute for 8 years, and I taught an environmental class, and I took them outside weekly as well. I think that the best thing you can do is to look for a local, to align with NGSS, is to find a phenomena outside that you can link in, and then to really, because it's not always realistic to go outside every class or to go outside once a week even, but to be able to find the pieces and parts that you might need and capture them when you're outside and bring them back into the classroom sometimes works really well. And so I've done that through actually collecting things, but also to digitally collect things. Something that, an example that I would use for sort of like a phenomena or a what's going on here in an environment is there's a book out there called Reading the Forested Landscape. And it gives a little snapshot. It'll give a picture, and then it'll just ask you what's going on in this picture. And then it goes through and explains what this specific plant or this specific fungus that you're seeing here tells you about the history of that location. And so to really look for a local phenomena to anchor your learning event in it would be where I would start with each of your units.
Yeah, I'd jump in too. So my students get a bio credit out of our class where we're outside almost predominantly. And if you look at the standards, ecology is a big one of them, and you never hit them all, you know, like it's impossible to hit every standard. And so I just accept that. And I really dive into the ecology standards. And yeah, Tom Wessel's book's great. And at the high school level, I think Bern Heinrich is an amazing author. He teaches at UVM, and his winter ecology book is great. You can tie a lot of bio in there. And then his The Trees in My Forest book is also really nice. I partnered with Tom Wessel's book, and they play with each other nicely, and it's at a great high school level. And he goes into some great poetry with ecology, and they go together nicely. So dive into the ecology. Like I always thought, you ask a graduating senior, can you name 10 organelles or 5 organelles? And they normally can't. And you spend so much time doing it. I'm like, well, we're gonna know photosynthesis. Like forget all the organelles, like they're gonna get what a chloroplast does. And you can do that outside, and you can tie that directly into what you're teaching. So choose your battles and go deep into the things they're passionate about, which is the ecology piece. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would say that bio is actually one of the science classes that we've actually had the hardest time getting outside, given the way our school sort of runs their bio classes, because they are so cell-focused or human body system focused. And that's been harder. And so I wonder if there are some like authentic research opportunities that you can connect your students with that sort of hit on those standards, but also connect to the natural world in different ways. And again, like partnering, I think many people have mentioned like partnering with other organizations. And, you know, you've got the Rubenstein Lab and Science School down by the water, kind of near Colchester, and a number of other partners that you might be able to tap into to help create those opportunities for your students. We've also established some inventory and monitoring protocols on our school campus with high school students to collect data on water quality and soil quality and forest health. And they're contributing to those data sets year after year, and going out in the field and actually collecting the data and then asking questions about it and things has been a really powerful experience for our students. But again, not necessarily in the bio curriculum as our school runs it.
So those partnerships with the data collection, is that going to you know, a Vermont agency or the town?
So we're exploring partnering with Globe to collect our data and to house our data there. It's kind of a heavy lift to start, I think, but then I think you get really quality systems put in place. iNaturalist is also a good place to plug in data. There's lots of like citizen science or community science places that maybe you've heard of too, you know, eBird, or there's a phenology one. There's a lot of places where students can submit data.
And I dropped into the chat. I know that the EPSCoR, which I cannot remember the name, like the actual acronym, because I get acronymed out sometimes, but they do have particular research programs for high school students and have a lot of resources for like both middle and high school level teachers. So I dropped that link in there. I know we're kind of coming up a little, we're after 5. I know Linda does have a good question I'm going to ask just about funding sources. So funding sources for things like binoculars or outdoor kiosks, benches, outdoor clothing for students. I know that we kind of talked a little bit about that donation route, but do you guys have any other ideas for particular funding for equipment that can go outside?
I think I mentioned a little bit about getting the parents group or PTA or whatever they call it at your school on board. We actually had a night where the educators went and presented to the parents group, and they were able to give us some funding for, in particular, rain pants are very handy for younger kids because you can layer under them and they can go on top. And so they funded a whole bunch of rain pants. I want to say maybe like 70 pairs or something like that. So that might be one way to get some funding. Also, if you have a local business, we had a local business donate some hammocks for children with mobility issues so that they could be comfortable. They could get out of their chairs, their wheelchairs, and be on hammocks outside. And then you write them a thank you note and they post it in the store. So those are a couple things that have worked in our community.
I also dropped in VASE, which is the Vermont Academy of Science and Engineering. Every year they have small grants that you can apply for. And I think they award 10 educators, and it could be anywhere between $500 and $1,000. This past year they ran it twice because of COVID, and they wanted to make sure that teachers were really equipped. So I think they just had a period close in March, but it usually opens in September, so that's upcoming. And then people are just dropping in, resources into the chat, so you might want to grab that.
And I feel like being really clear about what you need. Oftentimes when I make a list of what I need for, I guess this is more for clothing, the families in the class help provide whatever we need. Not all the families, but it kind of is a culture thing that we don't care if we're borrowing someone's stuff, but we kind of have a big bin. And as equipment, I'd also chime in that depending on how active your Audubon Society is with binoculars and stuff, they've been super generous with our class with ID books and binoculars and equipment like that.
Awesome.
I'd emphasize the power of publicity too. Like you get it shared on WCX, or we've been on New Hampshire Public Television a couple times, and when you're doing something cool, like call those places and say, hey, we're doing something cool, and they'll come. And then you'll never know who watches that. Like I've had people be like, wow, we're gonna give you money because that's cool. So there's power there.
Yeah. So I feel like we're getting obviously close to the end of our time. So I do actually want to just go back to our panelists really quickly. And I had mentioned to them earlier that this was not a question that I prepared them for, but I thought based on the Q&A that they could kind of just talk about one thing that they would want you guys to take away from this session. So we can just start back with Scott. What would it be, Scott?
I don't know. It seems like everybody here is already pretty inspired. So I would say like inspiration's a big one. Yeah, you could, the takeaway lesson is every lesson can be taught outdoors. You can never know it all, even as yourself as the teacher, and just continue learning, and you'll learn from the kids each time too. Like, just keep going. There's always more to learn.
Thank you. Kat?
You're not alone. There are lots of people, even if you're the only one in your school doing this, there's lots of people at all these other little schools. And so try to reach out to other people who are doing this so that you don't feel alone, or if you have a question about something, you can just bounce a question or an idea off someone. The Upper Valley Teaching Place Collaborative is a really great network to sort of tie into if you're sort of in the Upper Valley area, and there are sort of other like networks or ad hoc groups throughout the state too. So reach out to us for sure, and each other and other people. You never know who's thinking about this kind of stuff.
Tim?
I think the best thing you can do is to go for it. Take those first steps, be brave, be daring, and let your passion sort of lead the way, and your passion will create passion in your students as well. And so when you're out in the woods and you're excited to be there, your students will be as well. And I think the best thing you can do is to take those first steps in the ways that you feel the most comfortable doing, and move forward and keep moving. And yeah, when you get stuck, there is a huge network of people who want to encourage you and want to help you to be successful in this. And I strongly encourage that. And I also would plug the North Branch Nature Center's eco class. It is a great starting point for building those routines, as well as seeing safe ways to teach a lot of the outdoor skills.
Wonderful. Thank you. Amy?
As I said, I was my biggest obstacle. I think the biggest takeaway would be trust yourself. And I'm going to take the same thing that I took away from Cheryl Charles is that knowing that just being out there is giving your students something that they really need and is super valuable to them in their learning. Just being outside, nothing else, just being there.
And I'm sorry, wonderful. And Susan?
And I was just going to add to that you will see your learners in a different way, and you'll see different strengths and different weaknesses, and giving them the opportunity to shine or to maybe fail. You know, those ones who always shine, sometimes it's hard for them to be outside. So I feel like it's something that the learners need. And I really hope everyone can give it a go, give it a try, and let's stay connected.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for staying over. Thank you for our panelists for staying over. I think this was super successful. You know, the VSTA is going to be hosting one final session before the year's end. And I've heard, it's funny that we were talking about them. We do have someone coming from VINS. We have someone coming from North Branch. And it's on my to-do list. I need to reach out to someone from Shelburne. And we're going to be pulling them in so that, you know, our participants can really start seeing how they can be supported by organizations in Vermont. So not just striking out on their own, unless that's what they want to do. If they want to go and send your kids outside for 24 hours, go for it, you know, whatever. But if you are like, I need a little bit more help, you know, we're going to be connecting folks with some of the organizations around the state that can help you guys. So hopefully it was really impactful and powerful, and you can, you know, you got something good from it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to save this. I'm going to put it onto our YouTube channel, and I will send out the survey. The survey is how we give certificates, so make sure you fill that out so that I can bring it to my admin. And that's it. So thank you so much, and have a really great rest of the evening. Thank you.